Jesse Winker is back as a New York Met, but that's not why we're doing this emergency episode of the podcast. You know why we're doing the emergency episode of the podcast. Welcome in to another edition of the Bleav in Mets podcast. Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here with you. We will at some point get to Jesse Winker signing a one-year deal for the New York Mets, but we are all here for one thing and one thing only. The Mets have made it apparently abundantly clear. Pete Alonso, see you later. We don't expect you to sign with us. We expect you to go elsewhere. We are pivoting. We are going in a different direction at first base. What that pivot is, don't know. We will talk about that here on today's episode. Jack, my friend, how are you?
I'm great, Chris. This is a weird day. I don't know if I expected this to be the outcome that happened, but we'll talk about all of our feelings in a little bit. I think we can have a really good discussion here on the Mets' future at first base.
Do you know what the expected outcome is for everybody who listens to this show? To go to BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball to NHL and UFC. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. The Mets are not interested in Pete Alonso anymore. They have told him to take a hike. They're pivoting. They're going in a different direction. They expect him to sign someplace else, despite there not being an offer in hand for him to go someplace else. This is weird. I'm confused. I don't know what to feel. I can hear Mets fans being upset that David Stearns and Steve Cohen are going to let a forever Met walk away in Pete Alonso. I have thoughts on that as well. Jack, which of these angles would you like to start with, my friend?
I mean, we could start with the obvious one, which is Pete Alonso's not going to be a Met, and there's no other offer for him that we know of that's on the table. We haven't heard rumors anywhere, Chris, that Pete Alonso is in talks with any other team. The last we heard, I think, in terms of money, in terms of any offer, was the 3 years, $90 million deal that we talked about literally yesterday when we were recording that episode about what the Pete Alonso situation looked like. And now it's looking like, with this Winker signing and with Andy Martino of SNY's latest report, that was the best it was going to get. And if Pete and Scott Boras, his agent, aren't taking it, then he's not going to be a Met.
Here is the quote from the SNY story from Andy Martino. That deal, which pending a physical, talking about the Jesse Winker deal, signifies that the team is pivoted to an offseason plan that likely does not involve a deal to bring back Pete Alonso. I mean, you can't be any more clear about what the Mets' expectations are here. The Mets do not expect Pete Alonso to be wearing blue and orange next season. They don't expect to be able to come to terms. They have reached, at least in their mind, an impasse. They feel as if they've acted here in good faith, that they have tried to come to what is a fair deal to bring Pete back. And they feel, for whatever reason, at least this is just my read of the situation, they feel like this isn't going to get resolved anytime soon. And so they can't afford to wait around to see Alex Bregman sign someplace else. They can't afford to see, potentially, if he does get moved, Vlad Guerrero Jr. to be playing someplace else next season without the Mets seriously playing that scenario out and seeing what the Blue Jays would want in a return, if that is even possible. The last thing you want to do is Vlad to get traded someplace else, and you don't even have a phone call, right? Because you're so focused on a pursuit of Pete Alonso. So the Mets have made it clear, Pete, you're dragging your feet for whatever reason. This isn't working. We are moving on. We are bringing back Jesse Winker. We're signing him to a one-year, $8 million deal. The little secret about this here is Jesse Winker doesn't play first base. Jesse Winker doesn't play third base. So the Mets have to sign either a first baseman or a third baseman, or else opening day first baseman Mark Vientos, opening day third baseman Brett Beatty. Like, that's where we're trending towards. And I don't think the Mets can field that team if they want everyone to take their championship aspirations seriously. There's got to be another move coming. There has to be something that they do. The pivot potentially could include Tanner Scott. That has been very highly discussed, as that they might pivot and add a bullpen arm, and that's where they might spend the money that would have gone to Pete Alonso. And so if you bring in Tanner Scott to the back end of this bullpen, that is one way to pivot. But the Mets are pivoting here, Jack. The Mets are deciding that they do not want to bring back Pete Alonso, that they are done with this. They expect Pete to sign someplace else. So I guess the place to go here is, what are your thoughts? Like, are you okay if the Mets, with what the Mets did here, and are you okay if this isn't a negotiating tactic, and if Pete Alonso does play someplace else next year?
My mind is reeling from all of the different factors that go into this. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I really am surprised that the Mets truly, if this report is true and they really are pivoting to plan B, that they're willing to completely move on and switch gears. But what I think of next is, man, are the Mets really going to run it back with basically everyone besides Pete Alonso and now with Juan Soto? Because this lineup, obviously Jesse Winker was in it at the end of last year. Everyone else, is still there besides Harrison Bader, I guess. Jesse Winker is their new DH option or platoon outfielder, whatever you want to talk or whatever you want to call him. The rotation obviously is different, but I don't know. It just feels like there's such a glaring hole at first base still, and there's such a glaring lack of power, I guess, to make up for the loss of Alonso. Yes, I know Juan Soto is a great power hitter. I know how great Jesse Winker is from the left side, but there's not really a righty power hitter, and Lindor is, I guess, better on the right side, but he's a switch hitter. There's not like a true righty power hitter that the Mets have in their Vientos. My mind, Chris, is all over the place.
Sure.
Right
No,
now.
and I get it. And then here, let's just do the thought exercise, right? Catcher, Francisco Alvarez, young player that you want to see more from. We think the future is incredibly bright, but his floor is really low. Like, he's very volatile right now in this stage of his career. He could hit 30 home runs, but he also could struggle and hit 12 and hit 207. Like, so that's what you have at catcher. You currently, with this, are not playing a first baseman. You don't have a first baseman. Your second baseman is Jeff McNeil. And do I need to remind everybody what Jeff McNeil looked like in the first half of last season? And I don't think we need to do that again. Shortstop, Francisco Lindor, check, got it. Mark Vientos, third baseman, check, got it. Brandon Nimmo, left field, check, got it. Center field, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri. All right, they're going to platoon. You're going to get really good defense, but you're not expecting to get anything offensively. Juan Soto, your right fielder. Jesse Winker, your DH, at least against righties. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots. The bottom 4 of your lineup are all question marks. You can't do that. You can't try to win a division. You right now, if you don't make a major addition, and I'm not talking Brett Beatty starting third base. I'm not talking, signing somebody else to play first base in a platoon. I'm talking a real, true offensive addition to this team. You're behind the Phillies and Braves. I'm sorry, you are in this division.
Yeah.
Like, you are still behind them. You have a rotation that, while I like some of the moves, has a bunch of question marks. We know that under David Stearns, the bullpen is always going to be an up and down roller coaster. And so we don't know until we get to the season. And you have left too many holes, I think, offensively right now. First base for sure. Your center field, you're basically giving up for defense, and I'm okay with that. But Jeff McNeil's a question mark at second base. And I don't know what you're truly going to get out of the catcher spot this year. Again, I think the world of Francisco Alvarez. I'm not trying to use this platform to trash on Alvarez for 20 minutes, but he's a question mark going into the season. And so the idea of bringing Juan Soto in and pairing him with Francisco Lindor is, there are no question marks. We're going for it. We're rolling the dice. Here we go. Let's ride. And you're going to walk away from Pete Alonso, which, by the way, I don't have a problem with, especially if he wants more than what they were offering. But what's the backup plan? And I think that the thing that David Stearns deserves is he deserves the opportunity to show us what that pivot plan is, right? I have in my backyard the Diamondbacks, a team I cover on a regular basis. Christian Walker left to go to the Houston Astros. You should have heard the comments here in town. You should have seen the tweets here in town. Do you know what the pivot was? Trade for Josh Naylor, sign Corbin Burns. Nobody's talking about Christian Walker playing someplace else next season. You have to let the pivot plan play itself out. And so we need to see what David Stearns' plan is. Jesse Winker, part of that plan. Tanner Scott might also be part of that plan. Sorry. I tried to hold that for as long as possible, and it's gonna. We'll leave it in for the edit, but I tried as hard as I could to finish my thought and then mute, but it's not gonna happen. Jesse Winker part 1, maybe Tanner Scott part 2, and then adding another bat as part 3. But we have to let that process play out. We have to see what David Stearns' pivot plan might be, and then we talked about it on yesterday's show, so we don't need to do it a whole lot more. The Vlad stuff, the Vlad Guerrero Jr. stuff, and what the Mets' interest might be there. The Blue Jays have to be willing. The Mets have to be willing to part with prospects. That's going to take a little bit. That's not something that's going to, I think, materialize in 24 hours. So this is weird. I do want to push back on one thing, Jack, and I'd love your thoughts on this. There are a lot of people that are like, oh, gotta re-sign Pete, give him whatever he wants. Gotta have a homegrown Met. Gotta have somebody that you drafted, you developed, and he just spends his whole career with the New York Mets. Gotta have that guy. You don't have that guy, right? Tom Seaver didn't do it. Doc didn't do it. Darryl didn't do it. Keith Hernandez started his career someplace else. Ron Darling, Mike Piazza, David Wright, yeah, but didn't have the great end to the season. You want somebody to be drafted, develop, homegrown, be here, be a part of the success, have a great career, right? Has everybody forgotten about Brandon Nimmo?
Exactly.
Has everybody forgotten about that? That's the path that Mark Vientos and Francisco Alvarez are on. I mean, are we just going to ignore the state of the roster? I get it. You want to have a homegrown Met. I understand that Pete means something to you, but Brandon Nimmo standing right there. And everybody gather nice and close here. Let me just tell you something that's really, really important. And this is going to bother some people, but this is really, really important for everybody to hear. Brandon Nimmo is a better baseball player than Pete Alonso. There you go. I said it. So that's your forever Met right there. Brandon Nimmo is the forever Met. You want to ignore what he's doing because he's not called the polar bear and he doesn't hit 35 home runs. That's fine. That's your choice. Brandon Nimmo is a better baseball player and provides more value to the New York Mets than Pete Alonso does.
As an all-around player, absolutely. Like, his defense, unquestionably better than Pete Alonso's. His bat is not as much, doesn't have as much power, but there's some in there. Like, we've seen him hit for power. We've seen him hit for average. We've seen his speed as a base runner and as a fielder. So, yeah, I mean, Brandon Nimmo could be that guy. When I think about, I'm not too worried about the narrative of you need a homegrown Met. I'm sure down the road, given Steve Cohen's goals that he outlined when he bought the team to build up the farm system, to bring in or to bring up talent, to develop talent, to bring it up. And you know, he said, become Dodgers East, but not Dodgers East and have a new identity for the Mets. That's going to come eventually. I'm not worried about Pete Alonso not being that guy necessarily. What I'm worried about is what the pivot plan is, because as we get further and further into this offseason and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting for spring training, the options are dwindling. And Jesse Winker, for sure, great start. Like, I understand what he brings as a lefty DH. He'll be a great power option against righties. Lord knows we saw what he did towards the end of the season and in the postseason. But what's going to happen when the Mets are playing lefties or lefty pitchers, I should say? And Jesse Winker, the splits are not quite as good against lefty pitchers. What are the options for a right-handed bat that could play first base, maybe, or be another platoon outfielder, maybe? Because is Starling Marte really going to be a factor on this team going forward? I don't know. That's just my biggest question is, what is the solution now if Pete Alonso walks? And I really have no clue what could happen next. It could be Vlad. It could be another trade option, but I don't think right now it's in the free agent market.
I have sorted on Fangraphs their 2025 free agent tracker, and I have sorted it by first and third baseman, because obviously if they sign a third baseman, they can move Mark Vientos. If they sign a first baseman, Mark can stay at third base. Here are the options: Alex Bregman, Yoan Moncada, Mark Canha, Enrique Hernandez, Justin Turner, Whit Merrifield, Luis Urias, Abraham Toro, Ty France, Paul DeJong, Luis Guillorme, Rowdy Tellez. I mean, do I need to go beyond where I'm? This pivot plan has got to be awesome. Like, they either are, I think, truthfully, one of two things. This is the ultimate 4D chess move to get Pete to sign a deal, or they know they have a deal ready for Vladdy. Like, they know that they have swapped names. They have a pretty rough idea of what Toronto wants, and they feel comfortable giving it up. And then that's their pivot, because it's Bregman or bust at that point. It's right? Bregman or bust.
Yeah. Like, the free agent market is just not for what the Mets need right now. It's like, it's Pete and it's Bregman. And there's a reason why we did that episode a little while ago, Chris, where we were debating between the two of them, because one of them fills the major gap that exists in their lineup right now, the major hole. And without one of them to fill that hole, I don't know who else is out there. It could be Vlad. I haven't really looked into what the free agent market looks like next year. If there's like another rental option similar to that could fill one of those third or first base slots and let Vientos, I guess, play one of them. I have so many thoughts and no way to process through them fully.
Well, because you don't know what you can't see what the pivot plan is. Now, again,
I have no idea.
David Stearns deserves the ability to see the pivot plan through, but the pivot plan can't be Jesse Winker and Tanner Scott. Like, that can't be what you sell me.
That's
because
part of it. That's a part of the pivot.
Right, that's
plan.
a piece of it. You still need to, because there was an argument to be had. There was a legitimate argument to be had before you re-signed Winker to sign both Bregman and Alonso and move Vientos to DH. Like, that was a legitimate conversation that people were having. And so by signing Winker, you're basically saying that's my DH. And then maybe against lefties, my DH is Starling Marte, right? That's what you're saying. And so now I don't want to say you've pigeonholed your roster. By bringing back Winker, you have 430 outfielders, okay, on your active roster, which means two of them have to be your platoon DH. So that's where I think Marte and Winker slot in. Your outfield, you're going to carry 4 outfielders. Those 4 outfielders are going to be Nimmo, Siri, Taylor, Soto. Yep. Those 4 outfielders, the 2 platoon DH guys that I mentioned, and you don't have a first baseman. You don't. Fine, you want to move Mark Vientos. You don't have a third baseman. You need a corner infielder. Like, regardless of signing Tanner Scott, you need a corner infielder. I'm sorry. Maybe this makes me a bad guy. Opening day, Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio can't be in the plans at third base. It just you can't do it. You can't convince me that that's a winning baseball move.
Or Luis Angel Acuna, for that matter. Like,
sure, throw him in there.
There just has to be another option. There has to be something else that David Stearns and I guess Steve Cohen, to maybe a lesser extent, are considering here. Because
what could it be?
I have no idea.
You've landlocked your DH. You brought back Jesse Winker. He can't play the outfield. He's your DH.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing that's so interesting about bringing in Winker specifically is, like, yeah, it's a 1-year deal, but that means Juan Soto's your everyday right fielder, right? Because he's not replacing Winker at DH as another left-handed bat. Like, it's not. They fill the same role. Outfielder who can also DH, but Soto's obviously going to be the more likely option to be the right fielder and have Winker be the DH that is a platoon guy. So you're really saying you have your vote of confidence in Juan Soto playing right field, or I guess on days where a lefty is pitching, he'll be the DH and Starling Marte plays in right field. So there's a lot to process with both the decision to let Pete walk, the decision to bring in Jesse Winker again, what they're going to do in the corner infield. I feel like I'm talking myself in circles, but I really don't know.
Wait a minute.
An idea?
I do. I think I know what they might be doing.
Okay.
Are they going to trade for Luis Ariz and play him at first base? Remember the rumor from a couple of weeks ago that they had at least made a conversation with the Padres about Ariz. Ariz can play first base. He doesn't play it like he's not a Gold Glove over there, but
he's not a power hitter.
No, but he hits. He's going to get on base.
Gets on base.
He gets on base. Yeah, when I point at you, you speak. Yeah, he gets on base. So I mean, that could be the play. I mean, listen, folks, you are very clearly seeing what it's like when we do an emergency pod, and there's been no prep work done, that we are just reacting to these things as they happen. But truthfully, what I did is I looked on Fangraphs and I looked at everybody last year at first base, and I looked at their numbers, and I scrolled through and I saw Luis Ariz's name because I was looking for trade candidates. Like, other than Vlad Guerrero Jr., there's nobody else that's going to be moved. Josh Naylor already got traded, right? Carlos Santana and Christian Walker just signed somewhere. Oh, is Salvador Perez a free agent? Could bring Salvi over.
I don't think he is.
Jake Berger just got traded.
Jake Berger got traded. Yeah.
Here's the other issue that I have, right? Because there is another big bat that's sitting out there, Anthony Santander, but you're going to have 506 outfielders at that point. I mean, I just don't know what you do with your outfield if you add Anthony Santander to Starling Marte to Jesse Winker to Juan Soto to Jose Siri to Tyrone Taylor. Like, you got too many outfielders.
Right.
So Anthony Santander is off the table. What are we considering here? Are you considering signing a middle infielder, moving Vientos to first base, and moving McNeil to third base?
I don't love that either.
Jack, I'm just walking through all the potential scenarios that this team could
I know. There's so much power that you're losing by letting Pete Alonso walk. And I get that Winker's supposed to represent part of that. I get that Soto brings a ton of power himself. But man, like, it feels like without another masher in the corner infield, this is not going to be a better team than it was a year ago, I don't think.
No, it's certainly not. Man, this is tough. Like, when I originally saw the news, I was like, yeah, makes sense. They're going to pivot and they've got a plan, and trust David Stearns, trust the plan. And then you talk out what the different permutations of the plan might look like. And while I would be giddy to land Tanner Scott to the back end of the bullpen, and while I'm over the moon about Jesse Winker, and maybe we can touch on Jesse Winker here, I love that the wrestling heels on my team. Like, I love that
Right.
the guy that's going to piss off everybody else's fan base is on my team. I love Jesse Winker. I think he provides that just extra little oomph that the team needs, right? But they still need a first baseman. What I need now is I need a reporter to tell me what the Mets thinking is right now. Not like a report of who they're going to sign, but what their thinking is right now of how they're going to approach this, because I don't know what the options are. This might be David Stern's best magic trick if he pulls this out.
Or listen, this could be all for nothing. This could be a
sure,
you
but if it
earlier,
is,
40
but if
chess
it is,
move, Alonso's going to turn back and come back to the Mets.
Okay, no offense to either of us, but we're just two yo-yo podcast hosts.
Yep.
You're telling me Scott Boras and Pete Alonso couldn't put this together already? That they couldn't look at everything and be like, what are they doing? They're not walking away from you. They don't have any other option. Like, so if we could do it, if we could come to the conclusion that their options are limited, can Scott Boras and Pete Alonso come to the same conclusion? I truthfully don't know what the pivot is here. And that's both exciting and scary.
That's the thing, is like, it feels like all of a sudden neither party has the power anymore. Like, the Mets saying they're walking away makes it seem like they are pushing their luck, I guess, with this Pete Alonso thing. Like, sure, Pete played his overplayed his hand, and the market didn't pan out the way he hoped, and he's probably not going to get the money that he wanted to get at the start of this offseason from anyone. But also, like, because the Mets had been negotiating or trying to figure out something with Alonso for so long, they've kind of overplayed their hand in a way too, and there's not a lot of other options other than Alonso himself and signing a third baseman like Alex Bregman.
Right.
Or making a trade. Like, it feels weird because neither party seems like they have a ton of power.
Yeah. For once, we've done a show and we're getting to the end and I'm flabbergasted. I truly don't know what they're going to do. You do know one thing. We will be here to break it all down, whatever it ends up being. Jesse Winker back, 1 year, $8 million deal for the New York Mets to basically be their DH. No Pete Alonso, at least for the moment. They are going in a different direction. If you've gotten here to the end of this show, you know, not sure what that direction really is right now. Not sure what those options might be, but we will be back here to break it all down once the Mets find their solution to their offense, the solution to their first baseman. Make sure you follow the show, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you hit the follow, subscribe button, whatever it is, so that you are notified. Again, we told you these emergency episodes, they drop at any time. You are notified the moment that these episodes drop. You want to watch the video version of the show, just search up Jack McKessy on YouTube. That McKessy. Jack informed me earlier today that our number one most watched episode of this show last month was our Griffin Canning episode, which is, I think, the perfect indictment of what this podcast is all about. That episode is the one that's done the best in video form. That's going to do it for us. I don't know if you're going to get another episode from us this week. We were not expecting to do this episode. That prospect episode, man, that thing's just getting pushed off. We might do that in spring training.
Some way, somehow, we will talk about the top 5 prospects that could influence the 2025 roster, but maybe
those prospects might be but those prospects might be in Toronto by the time we do the episode. So I have no idea. I have no idea if we'll even be able to get to do the episode at that point. But that is going to do it for us. Weird times. A very big day for Metsland. I mean, they basically have said out loud, we're not moving forward with Pete Alonso. So a monumental day in Metsland. We will be here to break it all down as the rest of this story unfolds, because this is just chapter 1, folks. What the Mets do from here is anybody's guess. So we will be here to break it all down for you. Appreciate you joining us. And as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.